Hey everyone, all the stuff that we'll be going over in this video I put together in a step-by-step guide in my GitHub that I'll link down below. So, what is a honeypot? In this case, a honeypot's going to be a virtual machine that we set up with intentional vulnerabilities to essentially attract hackers. And the purpose of this is to test our virtual machine's security by inviting attacks. It might seem kind of counterintuitive to do this, but it actually allows us to study an actual attacker's activities and methods that can help us improve our virtual machine security. So let's get started. First things first, if you haven't already, let's set up an Azure account. So the first way you can set up an Azure account is just typing in free Azure account in Google and then coming down to this link, and I will have this link in the description below. You'll come on this landing page, and with the basic free account from Azure, you'll get free services for 12 months. You'll start with $200 US worth of Azure credit, and when you click this green button, start free button, you'll have to fill in a couple forms with personal data, including card payment details, such as a credit card or debit card. The second way you can go about making an Azure account is what I did, is with the Azure for Students. And if you are a university student, you qualify. With Azure for Student account, you will start with only 100 USD worth of Azure credit, but you do not have to put any sort of credit card or debit card information, and you get all the free services as the other free Azure account. In order to verify that you are a university student, you'll have to fill out a form in which you'll put in your university email, in which Microsoft will generate a validation email to that university email that you put in, and you'll click it, and from there it'll essentially verify you are who you say you are and you are a legitimate student at the university you said that you attend. Alright, so once you have created your account, it should take you to the Azure portal, and I highly recommend bookmarking it in your browser of choice, and like I did here, and it just makes it super convenient to log in, especially whenever you are doing other things and you time out of your session in the Azure portal. You can just move her to another tab, X out, and then relaunch essentially. So with all that out the way, let's create our virtual machine. There's a couple different ways you can go about that in Azure. The way I'll go about it is clicking this create a resource button here. Top left, you have virtual machine. I will click the create button right here. And here we are in the basics tab of the create a virtual machine dashboard. So you'll see the first thing is your type of subscription you're on, and the resource group. Essentially, a resource group is a logical collection of resources that share the same lifetime permissions and policies. I already created a couple. You can call it Honeypot Lab. The virtual machine name I will call Honeypot VM. I'll keep the region as East US. I'll keep the availability zone and zones 1 as their default values, as well as the trusted launch virtual machine for the security type. However, the image or the operating system that we want our virtual machine to have, I'm going to choose Windows 10. I will keep this run with Azure spot discount unchecked, keep the size as 2 virtual CPUs and 8 GB of memory, and the administrator account, username and password credentials. So these are going to be the credentials that we use to actually remote into our virtual machine. So whichever username and password you create, please write them down, put them somewhere that you can access later whenever we go to remote into the virtual machine. Admin. The public inbound ports, I'll keep to the allow selected ports option and keep the select inbound ports to RDP, which is going to be the remote desktop protocol. And don't forget to click or check this checkbox for confirming you have hosting rights. Click the next button to disks. We won't change anything in this menu, but next in networking we will. So click the networking, next to networking, and here we are. So for the NIC network security group, you want to click advanced, and then you want to create new underneath the configure network security group. And this is the default allow rule. I will remove this rule and I will create a new inbound rule. And again, I just want to preface this with, you will never, you won't usually do something like this. It's just that the point of a honeypot is for it to be a vulnerable resource. So just remember that you really shouldn't do this in any other situation. So I'm going to change the destination port ranges to a asterisk, so essentially stating allow any and all ports to be accessed. Keep the protocol as any, keep the action as allow, and you want to change the priority to, let's say, 100. And in Azure, the priority is essentially used to determine the order in which rules are processed. And the lower the number, the higher the priority. So meaning the earlier the rule is processed, even though it's the only rule. And let's change the name to danger any in, because again, this is being a purposefully and intentionally a vulnerable resource. So click OK, and that is it. We're going to click the review and create button down here. It's going to run a validation, and the validation is passed, and we're going to click the create button, and we're just going to wait for our virtual machine to spin up. All right, you can see up here in the notifications, we see that our deployment has been successful. So we can go to the resource in a couple different ways, but right here, and here we are at our Honeypot virtual machine overview. And what we really want to look at is essentially the public IP address. This is what we're going to be using to essentially remote into our virtual machine. So how do we do that? Well, there's a couple different ways. I am currently on a Mac, so the way I'm going to RDP is using the Microsoft Remote Desktop. If you're on a Windows machine, you can go in your search bar and type in remote desktop connection, I believe, and it'll look something like this, in which the computer field, you'll paste in the public IP address from the virtual machine overview. The username will be the username you set up with the account, the administrate, essentially the username credentials you made for the virtual machine. And then you can click the connect button. It should prompt for a password, the same password you created with the username. And then after that, you should actually have another modal pop up with something that looks like this, essentially asking you if you want to connect anyway, right? It can't be verified. You can check that box, do not ask me again for connection to this computer, and click yes, and it won't prompt you again if you ever exit and want to connect back to the RDP instance. So for my Mac users, you can find this Microsoft Remote Desktop application for free in the App Store. I'm going to click Add PC, and for the hostname and IP address, I'm going to take the public IP that is assigned to our VM. I'm going to paste it. User account, I'm going to add a user account. It's going to be the same username and password that we set up for our VM. Click add, and there we are. And then you can click connect. And just like if you're on Windows OS, this is essentially what you're going to see, but maybe it's going to be obviously a different form. Just click continue. you should see your virtual machine spinning up. All right, so for our virtual machine, we're going to check everything to no. And click accept. And you can check this as yes. All right, so now we are in our virtual machine. So what we're going to do now is essentially see if we can reach our virtual machine from our local machine. And what I mean by that is if it's accessible outside of the instance. So we can do that by essentially opening up our terminal, and then you can type in ping and then paste the IP of our virtual machine. And if it's running, if you see a bunch of request timeouts, you can hit Control C and it'll kick you out of that loop. And essentially what this means is that essentially indicates firewall restrictions, right? We're not able to actually access our virtual machine from our local machine. So in order to fix this, back on our virtual machine, you can type in the search bar here, wf.msc. Essentially, this is going to bring up our Windows Defender firewall with advanced security. Make this bigger. And click the very top option, Windows Defender Firewall with Advanced Security on local computer. You want to click the Windows Defender Firewall properties and the domain profile. You want to set the firewall state to off, the private profile, firewall state to off, and our public profile to off as well. And then click apply, click OK. You're going to get a bunch of notifications down here. And now if we were to run the same command, which you can just hit the up arrow in your terminal and click enter, you should see now a way different output. So now this is essentially saying that our virtual machine is reachable from our local machine, and if it's available to if it's reachable from our local machine, it's going to be reachable from anyone's local machine, right? And essentially this is your honeypot. You did it. So the last important step that I want to talk about is once you're done with your resources, once you're done with your virtual machine, please remember to clean up and delete it, because I would hate for you to run up a giant bill. So if you click the select all, I'll just go back. If you go to resources here in the very center of our portal dashboard, click select see all, you can select everything. Well, let's just click our virtual machine for example, and then click the delete button, apply force delete, I've read and understand, and then click delete. And while that's deleting, I'm going to delete the actual resource group as well. Sometimes they make you copy and paste the actual resource group name. And sometimes I have to go back and forth, but you'll see a lot more populated here. And again, just delete, apply force delete, and then type delete. And it's just this process of allowing it to run down its course. So yes, please make sure whenever you're done with your Honeypot or whatever resource for that matter in Azure to delete all the resources that you're not using, because I would hate for you to run up your bill. But yes, that's it. Thank you for watching.